it's kind of hard to do. You know, we've been through so many things, and to try and narrow it down to a 20-minute thing of all the blessings as we like read through these promises, like these promises ring true for me in my life. I'm no fronts, but as of April 3rd, that will have been the last time I was arrested. So 6 years ago,
Yeah,
April
girl.
3rd, 2019. And since then, I've been able to work the steps this year, kind of with my sponsor. And yeah, the promises are so true because they ring true in my life. So this is kind of my testimony in a short. My journey has taken me down many different paths of recovery, most of which failed, trying to do it my way. When I first came to the rooms, I felt like there wasn't a seat for me. I always convinced myself that no one could ever understand and give me that no one could understand, and that gave me every excuse to not play by the rules because I was different. Growing up, my mom tried to give me and my little brothers the most normal life she could, being a single mom. My dad was out of my life most of my life. Although I loved my dad dearly, I knew and although I loved my dad dearly, I knew it, he loved me too. I was told at a young age that my dad was an alcoholic. I knew it wasn't his fault, but he wasn't able to be there for me the way I needed because alcohol had taken him from me. I do remember being well educated on the disease. I knew if I drank, I too could get the disease that would steal my life, my family, and lead me down a path I never wanted to go. I vowed to never drink. In fall of 1999, my dad had a tragic accident. He jumped off the top of a four-story high apartment building onto the pavement, nearly ending his life. We later found out my dad was not just an alcoholic, but he had been self-medicating with alcohol because he was having major delusions and was later diagnosed with schizophrenia. My life quickly changed after that. I had to grow up quickly. I insisted on my mom letting me go to an alternative high school that I could flex my hours, still get my credits while helping her with my little brothers in the evening. I convinced myself if I can carry the weight of my family by myself, I can just start working on my plan for my life. I have always dreamed of having a strong, healthy family. I planned to wait till marriage before having sex, have 4 kids, 3 boys and 1 girl. I would be someone's everything and they would be mine. I love Jesus with all my heart, but I fear his judgment. So I knew I had to do things perfect. I grew up in church and my mom held me tight. She sheltered me to a default. She expected that I carry myself as a grown woman, and I was not allowed to mess up or disagree. I dreamed of what it could look like for my Prince Charming to ride in on a white horse and save me from this mess because my father never could. My goal was to grow up as fast as I could. My goal was to grow up as fast as I could and start a family of my own. At 16, I started my first job. My first car, started a new school, all while babysitting my little brothers in the evening. At 17, things started to get real for me as I started to hang out with a new crowd. My high school was full of hurting teenagers. I was literally only the person out of 150 plus kids that believed in Jesus. I started to make friends with people that I thought I could change, but it turns out I couldn't. My longing to be seen and heard by anyone who would listen began to consume me. I lost sight of Jesus, hope, gratitude, and began to believe the lie that I was the one lost and alone. The enemy comes like a thief in the night with the illusion that he has the answer to our loneliness, but really, he's just a counterfeit. That's one of the many things I've learned working through the 12 steps. My obsession to be seen, loved, and accepted turned into an obsession to lose weight at all costs. I began starving myself and found myself in an eating disorder, but soon boys started to notice me. At 18, I met a boy that introduced me to weed. Like I said at the beginning, I vowed to never drink, but I'd done a report on marijuana and it was harmless. And this sweet boy told me if I felt uncomfortable or was having anxiety or trouble eating, weed would help. The counterfeit. My first hit of weed felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders. I didn't have to give a crap about what was going on around me, or if I was able to check out. Finally, I could laugh again. I really didn't care at all what people thought about me. Along with that, I began to lose my inhibitions and will to hold on to my morals. I began to smoke weed any chance I got. I started skipping school and started fighting with my mom. Along with smoking weed, I started to slip into a deep depression and risky behavior. I eventually dropped out of high school and moved out with my uncles. The first time I drank with a group of guys, I drank until I blacked out and ended up in the back of my boyfriend's car. Things went to places I wasn't ready to go, and when I got home the next morning, I wanted nothing more than to die. I convinced myself I had blown it. There was no hope for me. I forgot about a loving God that sent his son to die on a cross, the Jesus who took all our sin and shame to make us new. I thought I had to fix this because I was the one who got myself in this situation. If I could just have been good enough, that would fix everything. We began to mess around, and a few months later, ecstasy and pills crept in. I had lost control and no one knew. I was hiding it from my family until I found out I was pregnant with my son. I thought it would be easy to just stop everything, but I couldn't stop. The drugs never stopped. And all through my pregnancy, I smoked weed until complications with my pregnancy had me on a morphine drip, Oxycontin, and in a dangerously toxic relationship. And in my next dangerously toxic relationship. 6 months pregnant, working at Rite Aid, isolated and trying to fight my own demons, I was introduced to a guy. At the time, I wasn't thinking about dating, but this guy had it together. He began to shower me with attention and affection like I'd never had before from a man. I quickly moved in with him. Although we had it together on the surface, like me, he was broken. I was convinced I could fix him, and he could fix me, forgetting that God was the only one who truly has the power to save or change us. On October 1st, 2007, my beautiful son Jonathan was born. But it wasn't enough. I took him home and my life began to spiral. Me and Tim tried to hold it together. During the day, he worked while I stayed home with the kids. We started popping pain pills and drinking every night. Less than a year after Jonathan was born, it happened. I found out I was pregnant again. I didn't know what to think. I told Tim and he was livid. He told me, "You cannot have this baby." To terminate this pregnancy was out of the question. I left that night with Jonathan to go stay with my mom, but I could not reach out for help. I didn't know what to do, so I went back to Tim. After the procedure, I felt so empty, like my soul had been ripped from me, and looking at Jonathan's little face, I knew I had made an unforgivable mistake, and I wanted to die. I started smoking meth, taking pills. My first suicide attempt left me locked in a psych ward. Then my addiction quickly turned into meth, heroin, and always pain pills, trying to hold on to little Jonathan until I couldn't do it anymore. Shortly after his second birthday, I told my mom she needed to take him because he wasn't safe anymore. On my 21st birthday, I went to my first treatment. I was introduced to the rooms of recovery and did 1.5 years in treatment. I was a dry addict, still holding on to the thought that if I could just be a good mom, my life would be fulfilled. I could not give my life over to God, and I was not willing to admit that I was powerless. I blamed everyone else. After my first treatment, I was finally ready to get reunited with my son, but we got news that Jonathan had been diagnosed with severe autism. Lord, how could this happen? I thought. Life on life's terms. Having a recovery that is not rooted in truth, that God is faithful always, means your recovery is bound to have cracks. So I crumbled. Everything you put before your recovery is the first thing you'll lose, even your kids. I had 2 years of sobriety, but I had put all my hope in being the perfect mom again. I was only willing to stay sober if it was life on my terms. I had Jonathan for a year before things got so bad for us. I was living in the projects, shooting dope, with sex, drugs, and violence all around my little baby. I had become a monster. And in August 2011, I buckled my exhausted baby into the back of a DHS car and I kissed him goodbye. I went through treatment program after treatment program. Every type of therapy and mental health service you can think of. I always finished the program, but I was a dry drunk. I never got to the heart issue. I would get a sponsor, but never get past the first step. Learn all the tools, but never apply them. I would never let people get too close for fear of being found out. 2015, living in sober living, with a few months under my belt, my grandma passed away. By the time of her funeral, I was already off and running again. I missed her funeral because I was standing at a bus stop waiting for my drug dealer to give me a ride to the funeral. He ended up picking me up later that week, and I never went back. I was shooting dope, living in his car until he lost the car. My addiction took me to places I had never dreamed, to sleeping under bridges. There were times I found myself lost in the woods with no shoes or camped out in a small hut covered in snow with wet clothes on. I was in and out of hospitals, jails, and institutions. I wasn't just addicted to the drugs. John was my other obsession. I would leave any safe place to chase after him, and I wanted him to chase after me. I wanted to be chased. I wanted to know that someone loved me. In 2017, John went to prison. That made the streets all the much harder to survive. I started to get sober, but at this point, my sanity was in question. I had been diagnosed with bipolar and couldn't even predict what next dangerous situation I would find myself in. I got it together for a few months right before John got out of prison, so just long enough for us to relapse together, but this time something felt different. I knew I wanted to change, but I didn't know how. I don't know when like the appropriate time to show this is, but I just kind of like wanted to show a picture for reference, like this was me the last time that I got arrested, on April 3rd, 2019. And but on Thanksgiving 2018, I was with my family, hiding the fact that I was using again. So scared, knowing it was only a short time before they would find out and I'd be gone again. I heard a song on the radio, a song called Reckless Love, a song that told me Jesus would chase me to the ends of the earth, and I began to weep. The words of the song say, "Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, and it fights till I'm found, and it leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. There is no shadow you won't light up and no mountain you won't climb up. You're coming after me. There's no wall you're not going to kick down, lie you won't tear down. You're coming after me." I believed every word and my heart began to soften. Even though I was living in sin, there was a man who would never give up and chase me to the ends of the earth. He would move hell and high water to make sure I found peace, and his name is Jesus. So on April 3rd, 2019, I woke up in Clackamas County Jail. I just got the news 30 days before that I was pregnant. And in that in that I found a new hope. Something had changed. I would not let go of God's promise that he would be enough to stand in the gap. And I did not have to give this baby up. I began to fight every way I knew how, not only for my life, but the life of this new baby living inside me. The baby that God had a plan and a purpose for. I was released from jail, and that was the first time in all of our 6-year relationship that John showed up at the gates to pick me up. I felt like the devil was on a mission right alongside God, and I was terrified. John was holding more drugs than he had our whole relationship, and I don't know how, but that day I began to finally say no. I do know how. It was Jesus, like the Holy Spirit, like he just put his hand on me, and I just began to see light, and I said, nope, I'm not going to do that, but I didn't know the way out, you know. That night, he got us a hotel, ready to party and get high. He had full rigs of heroin and meth. I had never been able to say no past this point, but I did. I sat on the bed and turned on the TV, and it was a cartoon. It was Madagascar. A vision so clear of me and the baby in the room, surrounded by drugs. I refused to have this happen again. And this time I could feel Jesus' presence in the room so strong. John started to get so frustrated that I was not partaking. He knew I was pregnant, but he didn't care. We began to fight, and he started to get violent. I heard God. It almost sounds like an audible voice when I look back, and I heard God say loud and clear, "Get your shoes on and go." That's exactly what I did. Over every other time, I always went back, but not this time. I walked for miles that night. I ended up in that hut in the woods. I'd been living there for months. And again, a flash so clear of having this baby in this hut by myself. So I left. I went and sat at a bus stop in the middle of the night, freezing, very sick, and I prayed for God to help me, and that's exactly what he did. Right at that moment, a random couple pulled over and asked me if I needed help, and I asked them for a ride to the hospital. I spilled my guts to them. They dropped me off and wished me luck. By the time I had reached the hospital, I knew I needed more support. I walked another few miles to my mom's work that night. And like the beauty of the story is like the timing was perfect. My mom was working a late shift. She hadn't seen me in months or months. She didn't know if I was dead or alive. And I literally arrived the moment she was like leaving. And if she would have left any sooner or later, like I would have been out there by myself. And so God's timing is perfect, you know? I sat in the car, dirty, raw, and broken, like the prodigal son. She held me. That's not actually accurate because she was like, oh gosh, this girl's a mess. So she sat and cried with me at least. And we were able to get me to the hospital because I was in such bad shape. I was at risk of losing my life and the baby's. After a few weeks of being in the hospital, on May 8th, 2019, I took my last hit of weed in front of the Portland Rescue Mission Burnside Shelter. On November 17th, 2019, I gave birth to my beautiful baby boy, Oliver. And as I think about this and the moments leading up to just having these precious moments of so I went to I was in bad shape. I went to Unity Hospital, and I was hospitalized in Unity Hospital because I was a mess. And after that, I was like, well, I'm gonna go find John. And so I made them let me out before I go to treatment to go to Burnside Shelter. And if you go to Burnside, you get a little bed, and it's really scary. And but the funny thing is, I have, I'm not gonna go on the tangent, but I'm just in the shower in Burnside, and there's this baby in here, and you're just surrounded by mess, but there's this like life. And I just felt the Lord just cleansing me, and I could just feel this life breathing inside me, and this is like my baby. And I wanted to name him Grayson because that's grace, like I felt like grace, just that's the word that came to my mind. But later on, my mom said, Amanda, his name's Oliver. And I was like, okay, I'm really big into meanings, and I feel meanings of names, I feel like they go somewhere. And like I didn't know what it meant, but later on the Lord has like revealed to me that it's like an olive branch. Like this was my olive branch baby. Like he was. And we cannot get clean for our kids. We can't. But there's this extending of grace, and Oliver has been the olive branch to my older son and taught me how to like rebuild. Like he just reknit, like God used that olive branch to show me how to be a woman again. And so that was really beautiful. So he was born. It was a miracle. I got to keep Oliver. He was healthy. He was strong. I finally came to a place of surrender. I realized that I was not enough. I was never going to be perfect, Mom. I was never going to be a perfect friend. I was never going to be a perfect daughter. But through Jesus, I'm a new creation, and so are you. I started to take the suggestions. I went to church every Sunday and never missed a meeting. I realized that it was life on life's terms, not mine. In 2020, I made the choice not to just do a program again, but find God at all costs. I knew it was him who had blessed me with such a gift, and I could not afford to lose it. I entered Shepherd's Door, and my life began to change. I found peace and a reckless love that moved hell and high water to get me to dry land. He is enough, and he always was. I started working the steps in all my affairs, and my life will never be the same. By doing the steps, I have been able to map out all the lies that led to using and rewrite history. I am powerless, and that's okay, because I serve a loving God who has all authority to change and heal us. I just must follow him. Working the steps gave me the chance to allow God to restore broken relationships. In February of 2024, I was granted legal guardian of my oldest son, Jonathan, which is unheard of. This is a mountain that could not be moved. That when they told me that I was going to get guardianship of my son after like almost 17 years of fighting this battle of addiction, the people are like, what do you mean you're going to give her kid back? What do you mean? Like they literally like flippantly were just like, and it was like God wove this tapestry together and brought people in my life to love on me and restore me. And I couldn't love Jonathan the way as much as he's brought like 10 million leagues of people to love my son the way he deserves to be loved. Because I couldn't even do it on my own. And so in 2024, that was a blessing that I got, a promise that I don't have to. I thought like I always would get caught up in the mess of like, Lord, I'm not going to have enough money. I don't have enough resources. I have an autistic kid on my hands. I'm isolated in all the things. And then I would go out and use instead of like now, like God had a plan all along. And so now I have a beautiful story and this is great, but like, I just needed to trust and let go. And he is just doing so much good things. God has been rebuilding my life in a way I never knew possible. I get to love and lead other women in their journey to recovery, and although it is still life on life's terms, it gets hard. I'm a drug and alcohol counselor, and I would have never dreamed, like in a million years, that I could be a leader, that I would have the courage to love people in a non-codependent way that just shares the love of Jesus in that way and still be healthy and whole. But it is hard. It's hard, okay? But it's worth it. Yeah. I get to love and lead women, and I know God will always show up no matter what, how hard it gets, and no matter how much I mess up, he stands in the gap. And as I was like writing this week, it's like I felt really lonely for a couple days, and I felt really dirty and just like, but then we're here and now, and people showed up for me
people show up for me, and that means the world. When I feel lonely, I have people that show up for me, and that is so important, because without that, you know, I would be alone and I would be using. So my sponsor often tells me, it's just step 1 through 3, which have been the equation that keeps on reshaping my thinking even now. So 1, I have to admit I'm powerless. I'm powerless over everything. I'm powerless over the effects of my separation from God, that my life had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore my sanity. And 3, I made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. I kept believing that I had the power to change me. The truth is, I'm powerless, and only God can restore me to sanity. So thank you guys for letting me share my testimony.